far as I'm aware, no ancient Egyptian crown has ever been found. Only images of the crowns.
Hi everyone, welcome back. Or if you're new here, I delve into the fascinating world of my dreams of ancient places and how it relates to archaeology, history, culture, and especially Atlantis. Today we're going to explore the ancient crowns of Egypt, and this is part 2 of looking at the ancient crowns of Egypt, because I did an episode recently where I addressed something that Graham Hancock had said about the dangers of the ancient crowns. And I realized there was so much more about the ancient crowns of Egypt that I really need to talk about. Not just the fact that they are symbols of power and divinity of the gods. There's just so much more that's captured the imagination and fascinate both historians, Egyptologists, and simply enthusiasts alike. Before we get started, if you haven't already checked out the prior episode on the crowns of ancient Egypt, I suggest that you do so now and then come back to me here, because there's a few things in there that are really interesting and relevant to what I'm going to talk about now. We need to be clear that there are essentially 2 groups of crowns of ancient Egypt. It's the Egyptian royals' crowns and the crowns or the headdresses of the ancient Egyptian gods. And yes, there is some overlap between these two. You see gods wearing the crowns of royalty, and you also see the royals wearing the crowns of gods when they want to appear to have the same attributes as those gods. But essentially, they are 2 different groups, and they serve very, very different purposes. Let's start with the crowns of the royals. The first one I'd like to talk about is the red crown, known as the Deshret. This was the crown of Lower Egypt, which is the area closer to the Mediterranean Sea. The Deshret is depicted as a red, let's call it a hat, and the Egyptologists indicate that it's made of cloth or leather, and essentially it's a hat that covers the whole head, and it extends down almost to the shoulders. It has a protruding curved bit at the back and what looks like copper wire, like a little tongue coming out at the front, more like a proboscis. Say it extends down the back of the hat almost as far as the shoulders. What I'm really trying to communicate is that at the back of the hairline, where the hairline ends, is where the actual crown ends. And in fact, it follows the hairline around the whole face, so no hair is exposed. You see many pictures of pharaohs like Nama or Khufu wearing this red crown, and that is to show that they rule over Lower Egypt. And of course, Lower Egypt was the fertile plains, the delta, the area where the silt rested in great abundance, creating very fertile soil. The next crown is the opposite. It is the Hedjet, or the white crown, and it symbolizes Upper Egypt. So that's the southern part of the country, and towards the start of the Nile rather than where the Nile comes out. And it's depicted a bit like a bowling pin. It's shaped with a bulbous tip. It's white, and the bottom of the crown once again follows the hairline of the person and covers the hair completely. The crown's also seen in many ancient carvings and depictions and statues, and it's worn by pharaohs like Mentuhotep II, and he actually reunified Egypt. So he would also wear the next crown that we're going to talk to, which is the combined crown. The double crown is called the Peshent, and it's a combination of the red crown and the white crown, and it symbolizes the unification of the two regions into the one Egypt. It's essentially depicted as the white crown sitting within the red crown, and the red crown's proboscis thing sticking out of the white crown. The unification of the two crowns into this represents the pharaoh's power over the whole of Egypt, and it was a very powerful symbol of unity and of sovereignty. And each of these crowns did hold significant meaning and power in ancient Egypt, serving not just as royal headgear, but as the symbol of their authority, their divine power, and the national unity. When I talk about the divine power, there are stories of the crowns being gifted to the pharaohs to continue the line. According to Wikipedia and other sources, the crown called the Atef is also a royal crown, but I dispute that because from my perspective, that is a god crown, which is a completely different category to me. And it was a theoretical kind of crown. And in fact, I never saw anything like one of those crowns in any of my dream regressions. So I'm going to label it as a god crown. And the god crowns are all about symbolism to the ancient Egyptians. So I'm going to leave that one to the next group of crowns, which I will do a completely different episode on. That doesn't mean that it's it for the royal crowns, because we've also got the beautiful blue war crown of the pharaohs, as well as this kind of skull cap crown and a few other unusual and interesting looking crowns that were worn by royalty. This episode seems to be going on a little bit too long, so I think I need to do a part 3 where I will look at the remaining royal crowns, especially the blue crown of war, which has a lot of significance, and the other miscellaneous interesting looking crowns, before doing a final episode, or even 2, on the interesting, let's call it headwear of the gods, which were very symbolic. But before I finish this episode, I should really explain the question at the start of this episode, which was, why were none of these crowns ever found? Well, I did an episode a while ago about a dream that I had about one of these crowns being made. So I'm just going to tag that to the end of this episode, because I think that explains it all. The real crowns were actually quite delicate, and at the end of each reign there was a symbolic destruction of the old crown at the same time as the new crown being presented. Hopefully, sometime in the future, the archaeologists will find a record of this and they'll be able to verify what I'm saying is true. So that's why the archaeologists can't find any of these crowns today. But here's a bit of an extract from an episode I did regarding a dream that I had about the making of these crowns. This will give you a feel for just how delicate and lightweight these crowns were. I was watching someone make a white crown, and they had this like cone shape, not quite the same shape as a white crown, which I know that sounds a bit weird. It's a bit like a last that a cobbler uses to make shoes. So this was a stone item, and it looked like a cone, really, a fairly plain cone, and they used some kind of gum and they put it right at the top of this cone. And then they had what I believe must be papyrus, but it looked pretty much like just strips of, very, very thin strips of some kind of, well, weaving stuff, which, as I said, I think probably was papyrus. And they laid it out crisscross right on the top of this cone thing. Then they started weaving with it, and they weaved all over this stone cone until they had completely covered the cone. And then they did this beautiful edging around the base of this weaving thing. And the end result of that was this tall looking woven hat. But that's not how it ended up, because what happened next was they took what looked like white paint, and I don't know, maybe it was some kind of plaster, and they kind of painted it on this stuff that they'd woven, and it was kind of wet and a bit, mushy, and they molded it, and they basically molded it in a way that they pulled the top of it inwards, so it ended up with a bit of a knob on the top. And then they shaped it, and they put it on someone's head and just continued shaping it until it was, absolutely perfect and well balanced, so it was easy to wear and wouldn't fall off. It was nice and secure. And then they packed it with what looked like straw or something dry, and they set it off to one side to dry out. And the end result was this white, beautiful white, well-shaped crown helmet thing. Now, in terms of the red one, I didn't see them making any of those. I just saw them making a white one. But I could read between the lines for that as well, I'm sure, having seen what I've seen. But it's no surprise that no white crowns have been found, because this would have been a relatively delicate item. I wonder if archaeologists have found any weird cone-shaped stone items and wondered what they were. It would be very nice to find out. Anyway, that's it for today's journey into the world of royal crowns of ancient Egypt. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like it, even share, and thanks for subscribing if you do subscribe, and if you don't, well, give it a thought. So hopefully I'll catch you up in my next episode. Thanks for listening. Bye.